And everybody knows how to use their speaker view and probably by now, and their gallery view. Okay, well, let me introduce our first reader. Crystal Ockenfuss was born in Buffalo. She attended SUNY Buffalo, where she received her BA in German and anthropology and had the pleasure of studying with Robert Crowley. Crystal pursued graduate studies at the University of Virginia, and in 1998, she moved to the Bay Area from Germany. She's published poems in Slipstream, Datura, Bell SF, the McCullaugh Review, and the Buffalo Evening News. In 2013, her chapbook, The Hobo Alphabet, was published by Dancing Girl Press of Chicago. Really recommended it. It's a wonderful book. Currently, she is working on a new manuscript based on a 1927 geography primer from her old high school, Sacred Heart Academy, as well as a group of poems related to the fires of 2017 and 2019. She is married and has 2 children. Please welcome Crystal Ockenfuss.
Hi, folks. Hope everyone can hear me. I'm going to start with something a little bit older today because Sandy asked for some requests. So I hope you can see this. This is the cover of the Hobo Alphabet. I'm just going to read 2 short works and then I'm going to move into some newer things. So the Hobo Alphabet, in case you don't know, is a series of pictures that hobos used as a way of marking houses to give information. I'm going to read 14 and 15. You can sleep in the hayloft and alcohol in this town. You can sleep in the hayloft. You take the night whole. The insane sale of spendthrift stars is something you can still afford. It offers itself like a speckled treasure map. If only you were not blind when you covered her, you shut out the sky, her hand clutching the compass that was your chest, your heart drifting in other directions even then. Number 15, alcohol in this town. There is alcohol in this town. In this valley, your bones will not be dry. You can follow the Big Dipper to freedom from the flesh that comes upon you when you least expect it. The moonshine you seek will rot your insides less than the cool light that casts your shadow where you would not go but must. So the geography primer that Sandy mentioned is from 1927, so it's a lot different. The geography of the United States especially is a lot different than what we would expect now. I was particularly attracted to a little section that was called Products of the States. But instead of reading you those poems, since we don't have a lot of time tonight, I picked out a couple of poems about my hometown, Buffalo, and then one about my adopted home, the Bay Area. So the first one is called The Scattering, and it appeared in the Buffalo Evening News. They're closing Sinbad's, a bar I've never been to, in a city I hardly know, and yet I mourn the place, the way I do a great uncle I rarely saw. Just knowing he was still alive served me as an anchor. The thought of him rusting away in the Zephyr Grill or at the Schupper House made it easier to believe my childhood was right where I left it, there under the table at some grown-up's feet, next to a square pocketbook or behind the frayed pool table. The comforting clink of the balls racking up, that perfect moment before the split when children are certain the scattering is for the best and the only way to win. So the next one is called Rust Belts, or actually Famous Belts, and it's about the Rust Belt, which some of you I'm sure are familiar with. So Famous Belts. The Rust Belt is not like ordinary belts, no girdle of Venus. If it was irresistible, then only to immigrants. It held up their dignity, let them hang their day clothes in dinged up lockers, drove the domed lunchboxes to bare cafeteria tables. Belts conveyed them to an American dream that moved in time to the tact of nails, of nuts and bolts, screwed into place on the line, assembling lives that resembled stiff safety. Nothing starts out rusty. Empty belt loops remind you of belt's other life, the harsh independence of leather, how it means to teach you a lesson about the world's fickle temper and the fear of becoming unbuckled, let loose like a stray dog, teeth bared now to everyone, no longer knowing which way is home. And a similar poem, You Can't Go Home Again. You can't go home again. It wouldn't recognize you living as you do in a place where the lilacs bloom in November. Your skin is tan now and thin. Are you still kin to the large-handed men who raised you in the shadow of smokestacks on the bank of a sluggish, dull river? What sparkle it had turned over to light the bruised, dark city. Why do you want ghosts to embrace you? What free kisses are hands the color of beef, rough cheeks whose beards respect no hours, breath that rises on the scent of its own yeast. No ghost can hold a hammer, strike a match, or hit the brakes hard enough to force a screech. Any sound now of weathered glasses clinking, the rattle of hollow doors slammed on their hinges, this blame or praise will be yours, sanctified by streetlights. You'll stand waiting for a bus, but it will be empty of ghosts, just filled with people who look like you. Okay. Now one about San Francisco, called San Francisco by Osmosis. What I want from you is San Francisco by osmosis. As if when loving you, I could exchange oceans, trade the tender Atlantic blue for a colder color, placid steel, move from ripe sugar maples towards sequoia and bastard eucalyptus. Your skin could add me to outlaws and the grit of journeys over land or around the Horn. Teach me the blind faith of desperados and fools who ran out of earth at Ocean Beach, but never out of sky. So just like all of you, I'm sure, you've been thinking about COVID. And for me, a lot of people, especially those who don't live around here, have mentioned COVID, our response to COVID must be a lot like the response to the fires. That's true to a certain degree, although I think the fires brought us together physically, whereas COVID obviously is more conducive to a meeting like this. But I've spent some time writing about the fires that I collected in a group of poems called The Opposite of Red. So I'd like to read you two from there and then some about the pandemic. So some of my neighbors did lose houses, and one of my neighbors put a portion of their old house in the front yard of their new house. It's the metal frame of their grand piano that burned. So this is about that. Firebird. Ghost piano, our own Aeolian harp. What hasty god gripped you that last night when you were still wood and cool ivory? Who stripped you bare in the hot dark? You never expected to play beyond hammers, to release sound into exposed metal sinews. What holds you together now? Nothing but the memory of music, the open wire of you, flaring like the skeleton of some prehistoric bird, fired into a strange, naked future. For those of you who live around here, this one should be obvious. Highway 12. Highway 12 is haunted in broad daylight by the ghosts of trees, the blaring absence of houses. The street is sunlit in a way it was not before. Behind the winery, the mountain wears the stubble of a man too tired to sleep. We all see things that are not there. From the road, the crows point to empty spaces. They cannot roost in air. Everywhere, the ashes cling to the outlines of doorways blown open to all eyes. Broken fences stretch out their arms now and love the landscape they scarred. So the pandemic has taught us all a bunch of different things, like staying masked, things that we're not supposed to touch, like our faces, but also things like staying apart 6 feet. So this poem is called 6 Feet. Two grown cats lying tail to tail, outstretched, as if ever cats would deign to be a human measure. The sad length of a standard door, mostly shut now, or a sofa the size of one average person, capable of filling a bathtub alone, also 6 feet, shallow enough to show me naked, my breasts cresting bubbles. A moose's antlers, hard to imagine I'd picture exactly that. The moose itself is more than we need. Just envision a lonely dining room table, end to end, laid now with nothing or no one. See my full-sized bed, head to foot, me in between. How far from you? Now one called How We Protect Ourselves Now. Touch wood. No, don't. We don't know how long the virus lives on surfaces. The wood once a living thing, porous like us, hurt by bleach and heat. It's not the sterile things that attract our hands, steel, plain white cotton that can handle the bubbling clean. Throw salt over your shoulder, or don't. We can't preserve ourselves in brine. What if we go to the cupboard and find it bare? How now to spice our lives, leaven the flat, doughy days, the ordinary clinging to us for dear life, the dust settling with new determination, the danger of casual hands dismissed. Maybe Corona hates garlic or lavender, fears the stench of incense. Will we pack our open mouths with herbs? Our masks force us to feel our faces like strangers standing too close who won't look away. Okay, so the final section, I asked on Facebook before this reading for requests, and a couple people wrote back to me and said, please read something uplifting or something funny. And I said, okay. So the last couple I'm going to read, I hope are uplifting and or funny or both. So this one is called Eat Local. I can't resist your dick. It's the shade of first plums, the kind they sell for a fortune in early spring, picked by exploited women from the Southern Hemisphere. Tonight, I don't care about my capitalist teeth if I suck the life out of the revolution. Tonight, I'll put my mouth where your money is, to the left of your keys and the loose change. There should be a word for the damage done by impatient zippers. Eat local, so much depends upon a plum and my eagerness to taste it, even out of season. Okay, the next one, and you can probably see there's lunch going on or food in my house, is called Named Heartbreak. This is the soundtrack of your life, the song you were born under, indelible as astrology. Elvis is a star too. Can he predetermine your end, set you permanently on the path to Lonely Street? Heartbreak Hotel is where you come from, that first single room occupancy. It cannot last. First, it's her water that breaks, your number one, flood of salt. It's a damp premonition of what will follow. You'll be so lonely, you'll die. But first, the king. He'll show you the way it can be done. With spangles and spandex, so sad but still so shiny. You could stamp your ticket for Graceland, live forever in Las Vegas as long as no one sees you leave the building. None of those hotels is named Heartbreak officially, though they've probably all seen it. Maybe not, just not yours, or not yet. Lonely Street is much longer than any of us thought. It extends way past 3 minutes, as if the king kept singing, but we turned off the sound. Terrified already, our lives were wordless karaoke night in a bar we only stumbled into, in a town we could not leave. So all of us probably get these prompts where they ask you to write poems about words you've never heard of and you would never put together. So this was actually from one of those, but it also was one of my European friends was asking me what kind of a name Waylon was, like Waylon Jennings. So this is called Words on Waylon. Who names their kid Waylon? It's like asking for trouble, to give your boy a name that sounds like hollering, like your cat when it's sick or when you got your finger caught in your uncle's fishing reel. The line bit hard. You were angry bait and stung with salt. Damn it, Waylon's not a name for anything that's not crying, for anyone who wouldn't drink before noon or eat steak raw. Who wants to be called something that sounds like an abandoned station in the Antarctic, like a brand of matches they don't make anymore? Even if there's some cowboy lament that made you soft, or because he said you were a Texas rose, before you two set another wailing human on the boil, don't send that little kettle out with a name like a hiss. Way leads on to way, leads on to Waylon. He'll find the road dirty enough as it is. Let him be W.C. Handy for all you care. Let him go unlettered into the battered city. Let him find his secret name and whisper it into the ocean ear of his beloved and hear her say yes. So the last two are requests, special requests from friends who wanted something sweet to finish, kind of like dessert. This one is called Flowers in a Glass Vase. Bring in the bugs along with the bud. Add the errant snail at the bottom of the glass. Cut flowers die of pleasure. Their petals shroud the sunlight last seen in green gardens spilling strawberries. Briefly, sweetness takes up residence, flutters on our tongues like flies swallowed alive. The secret source of that peculiar sound you make when you meant to say something and I kissed you instead. And finally, to close out, a short one called Briefly Before Sleeping. Impossible, this absence of sound. Stand under the icebound stream of stars. They have nothing to say to you. Isn't it good not to ask? To feel your tongue like a slack red animal, a fox in its burrow, exhausted after a long run. You've left all the yapping behind you. Now exist as half-remembered scent that makes the dogs prick up their ears and shift at their master's feet briefly before sleeping. Thanks for listening, folks. It was a pleasure reading for you all. One last thing. Normally when we're at Aqus, and thank you, Sandy, for asking me a second time, we would be buying food from them and we'd be supporting them. So in lieu of that, and I'm sure all of you are doing this all the time anyway, but please do consider, buying a book, not necessarily mine, but any book from a small independent press. or your local bookstore. Pay it forward. These times are hard. If you are in Petaluma, you know, maybe you want to do takeout from Aqus. But I thought I'd just plug Dancing Girl Press publishes a lot of fun books. And she's always got something new, so find them online. And like I said, if you know, any small press will do. So it was really nice, and I'm looking forward to hearing all of you read, and thanks for the great turnout.
Yay!
Wonderful. Really
Thank
nice.
you.
Yay! Good job.
Really great.